Angron, Lord of the World Eaters, 12th Primarch of the Emperor. The Red Angel is one of the most infamous of all the Primarchs of the Emperor, and for good reason, being an absolute font of rage and wrath. His life was always spent in servitude, be it from the High Riders of Nuceria, to the Emperor of Mankind, to now the Internal Damnation, to being the prime champion of the Blood God Khorne. Indeed, many lament the fate of Angron, and many champion that he is the perfect definition of Warhammer 40k, someone who is meant to be the best of the best, transformed, twisted, and horrified into something damned and evil. Yet, is this the case? Many people often argue that Angron was supposed to be an empathic Primarch, a paladin, if you will, one of goodness and of justness. But is that really what he was meant to be? Is that really what he would have become? Was Angron really destined to become the Paragon that many people think he was? Or was it something far more darker in mind? But in today's video, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be trying and answering the question, and in the process finding out why people are just wrong about Angron. Or are they even wrong about him? But without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get cracking on with today's video. So to fully understand the character of Angron, we need to understand his story. The story of Angron begins like all Primarchs, being created by the Emperor, but then being yeeted across the entirety of the galaxy via the Chaos Gods, with some help from Urda. From there, Angron would land upon the world of Nuceria, relatively close to the Ultramar system. Nuceria was not a nice place to say the least. It was governed by people known as the High Riders, an insanely technologically powerful and advanced race. Though whatever progress they made in technology, it was completely and utterly undone by the complete lack of morals or ethics, with them having many debauched and disastrous belief systems. Yet if this wasn't bad enough, young Angron would be assaulted by an Eldar party. Angron, his first ever memory after leaving his registration capsule, was fighting off Eldar, beating them to death with naught but his bare hands and a rock. He would succeed and drive off the raiders, killing them all, but he would be left wounded, and eventually he would be found by the High Riders. From there he would be taken and placed into the gladiatorial pits. He would be abused and mutilated beyond recognition, with the ultimate travesty being the implantation of the Butcher's nails, a cerebral implant that made him feel abject pain if he wasn't doing anything but killing. And here Angron would suffer blow after blow after blow, with the ultimate culmination with him having to kill his adoptive father. But Angron's spirit would not be broken, but eventually he would rally the gladiators and escape from the Colosseum. He would then flee into the mountains, but his band of poorly armed, poorly trained, poorly equipped but brave fighters stood nothing against the advanced technology and standing armies of the High Riders. Thus, Angron was ready to die. However, the Emperor wouldn't allow such a thing. On the eve of the battle, the Emperor would appear before Angron and offer to save him, but only him. Angron, at the prospect of leaving his brothers and sisters to die on the eve of battle, would not even countenance such a thing. He would die as a free man. He would reject the Emperor outright, and fully prepared an intent to die with his fellow gladiators. The Emperor, however, did not care about Angron's wishes. He created Angron, thus Angron was his to use. The Emperor would teleport Angron onto his flagship, robbing him of his death. And this moment was the most pivotal in all of Angron's life, for he had gone from being a free man, so close to dying a glorious death, to simply becoming another servant to an even greater tyrant than the High Riders. From here, Angron would be introduced to his legion, and the reunion of father and sons would be devastating to say the least. Angron was said to have slain 7 of the highest ranking officers that came to see him, with the 8th, that being a captain known as Khan, being the only one to stop his rampage. Only after he was beaten unto death, or near death, I should say. Angron would lead his World Eaters time and time again, and each time they sought to gain the approval and love of their father, only to be met with scorn and disaster, and oftentimes him setting outrageous and ludicrous goals, as giving his sons, which usually numbered a company of Astartes, only 1 Nucerian day, or 33 solar hours to conquer a world. If not, they would be punished by decimation. Angron hated his legion, no matter what they did, even when implanting themselves with the Butcher's nails, a technology so ancient and potent, not even the Emperor could solve its secrets. Angron would never love his sons. The hatred that infested Angron's heart would continue to grow, and it would be no wonder that he would be one of the first ever Primarchs to join the rebellion on the side of Horus. Angron would participate in the heresy with zeal. This would culminate in the Shadow Crusade, a joint word-bearer and world-eater operation to ravage the heart of Ultramar, where Angron would return to his homeworld of Nuceria, and he would find the bones of his fallen brothers and sisters, and realize that the world had remembered him as naught but a coward who fled on the eve of battle. All this emotional pain, in combination with the physical deterioration caused by the butcher's nails, would be causing Angron to die. And here, to save his brother, and to gain more power for the ruinous gods, Lorgar would transform Angron into a demon prince, and there he ever has been, fighting as a slobbering madman, forever a slave, enchained to the dark gods. From the Siege of Terror to the 41st millennium, Angron has continued to roam, seeking naught for his bloodlust, knowing only a few moments of peace each time he dies. For it is only then that there is peace and quiet. And lo, the tragedy of Angron has ended, forever a servant, forever a slave, forever in pain and torment. Now that you know the story of Angron, it's quite easy to see how many people sympathize with him. But what is that thing that we always hear people talking about him supposed to be some type of paladin? And that's because of Angron's Primarch power. He was meant to be an empathetic Primarch, meaning he could take the pain and hurt of others and put it on himself. A shield, if you will. Many people often translate this into him being kind, nice initially, as someone who wishes to stand in front of others and sacrifice themselves is usually of a kinder soul, a la Vulcan of the Salamanders. But ultimately, we have no reference of that, for we never got to see Angron as anything but a bloodthirsty butcher. And so we come to the belief of the community that Angron is the perfect example of Warhammer 40k, someone who was meant to be something of goodness, of kindness, being twisted, turned, broken, and butchered into bloody blades of retribution and death. No light, no love, no peace, just blood, death, and war. It is a fitting narrative, and a very poignant allegory for Warhammer 40k, and it makes a great deal of sense. But is that really true? Would Angron, if things had been differently, really turned into the so-called perfect Primarch? Next we come to a very big one, that being the Emperor and the Butcher's nails. Many people often ask why couldn't the Emperor remove them. Some chalk it up to the Emperor simply not caring enough. But the truth be told, the Butcher's nails are a terrible, terrible piece of technology. And they weren't exclusive to Nuceria, as we get a glimpse into exactly what on earth they were. And they are something that not even the Emperor wished to trifle with. The techno-archaeologist moved from the shadows beyond the harsh glare of the downward lighting aimed at the body. He found he couldn't look away from the patient's face, and the crude, vicious cybernetics implanted upon the unconscious monster's skull. Teeth of the cog, he swore softly. The Emperor seemed too distracted to notice blasphemy. Minute circuitry on the fingertips of the Omnissiah's blood-stained surgical gloves pressed to the giant's chest. They generated an aura of ultrasound wherever they touched. Crude internal scans of the spine and surrounding flesh drew themselves upon several of the nearby monitors at various angles. The slumbering body gave a heavy twitch and a grunt as pain spiked through its nervous system. Archon moved around to the giant's pain features, the metal teeth, the furrowed brow, the scars upon scars, the cables tendriling out of his scalp like cybernetic dreadlocks. Angron. He breathed the name. Yes, the Emperor confirmed, inhumanely toneless. I am trying to undo the damage that has been done to the 12th. The Emperor gestured with a free hand, similarly smeared with blood, to 3 screens that projected a flickering hololith of the giant's skull, brain, and spinal column. The image was riven with dozens of slender black tendrils that were anything but organic. Arkin stared at the scanned images in slow dawning understanding. His comprehension of human anatomy was absolute, given his experience and education. But the images on the screens weren't entirely human, nor were they in accordance with the sacred and approved pathways to augmentic ascension. This was rather more profane. It is my belief that you have seen this device before. Is that so? Yes, Divine One, in my expedition down to the Heraxian vaults. Vaults that were resealed by your own decree, ratified by the Fabricator General Kelbor Hall, and all findings within unrecorded. Yes, Divine One, the law within represented a moral threat and a potential perversion of cognition. The Emperor's fingers pressed to the unconscious Primarch's temple. But you saw a device like this? Arkenland nodded. The The profane text intoned with Heraxian vaults named it a crucimen. The Emperor continued his fingertip scans, saying nothing. "I have never seen one implanted and operational," Arkan confessed, "and never of this specific pattern and intensity in the repose of stasis or storage. The devices in the sealed vault were rather more crude than this construct." "That is to be expected." "Why, in your infinite wisdom, would you implant this device inside a Primarch?" "I did not do so, Arkan." "Then, with great shame, I confess that I am not certain what I am looking at, Divine One." "The 12th and its legion call them the Butcher's Nails." The Emperor kept staring at the screens. "You are looking at modifications to my original template of the 12th. More precisely, you are looking at modifications of primitive genius. Before these examinations, I believed the enhancements performed upon the 12th on Nuceria were the source of its emotional instability. My hypothesis was that they stirred the 12th to a sense of perpetual, but ultimately artificial rage. Yet, the opposite is true. With the alterations made to the limbic lobe and the insular cortex, the surgeons have impaired the 12th's ability to regulate any emotion at all. Furthermore, they have rethreaded its capacity to take pleasure in anything but the sensation of anger. They are the only chemicals and electrical signals that flow freely through and from its brain. All else is either dulled to nothingness or rewired to inspire a supreme degree of agony. It is a testament to the durability of my Primarch project that the 12th has managed to survive this long." "His own emotions cause him pain?" "No, Arkan. Everything. Everything causes its pain. Thinking, feeling, breathing. The only respite it has is in the rewired neurological pressure it receives from the chemicals of anger and aggression." "That's vile. Perversion of cognition rather than purification." The Emperor showed nothing but passionless interest. "Such rewriting of physiology certainly hinders the 12th's higher brain functions. The device is cunningly wrought for something so crude." "Can you remove it?" "Of course," the Emperor answered, still looking at the screens. Arkan did his best to hide his surprise. "Then, Divine One, why would you leave it there?" "This is why." The Emperor rested both hands on Angron's head, one with the fingertips pressed to the Primarch's temple and cheek, the other pressed towards the crown of his shaven head, where the capable tendrils joined the flesh and bone. The images on several screens immediately resolved to a clearer imprint of a brutishly dense skull, miserable with crude cybernetics and bone scarring of powerful surgical laser cuts. "Do you see?" the Emperor asked. Arkan saw. The tendrils were sunk deep, rooted in the meat of the brain, threaded to the nervous system, and down in roughly serpentine coils around the spinal column. Every movement must have been agony for the Primarch, feeding back into the base emotions of anger and spite. Worse, the brain's limbic node and insular cortex were more than just savaged by the pain engine's insertion. They had been surgically attacked and removed before implantation. The device hammered into his skull hadn't ruined those sections of the brain. It had replaced them. Ugly black cybernetics showed on the internal scans, in place of entire sections of the Primarch's brain tissue. They are the only thing keeping him alive. The Emperor could have removed them, but if he did, he would have killed the Primarch. And as we've seen, the Emperor wanted him alive, regardless of how he was. And here we come to the biggest issue in Angron's life, the biggest thing that was ripped from him, and ultimately the one moment that broke the young Primarch. That being the Emperor's decision to rip him from Nuceria. As to why the Emperor did this, it's quite simple. He didn't care. He wanted Angron as a weapon, as a general. If he could still do that, that was all that mattered. Even during that excerpt, he refers to Angron as the 12th, and that's what he saw him as. The 12th tool. Not a son, not a person, not a man. Just a tool. And whilst that is indeed the canon argument, I believe it's important to note that this could also be a symptom of the Emperor having so many different writers, that this is just an inconsistency occurred, but again, that's a bit of hearsay, so And take that with a grain of salt. And the latter answer does indeed fit with some of the Emperor's character, but it's one of those things that it's rather hard to understand, especially when teleporting the gladiators on top would be, simple, but, well, that's neither here nor there. Again, all of these points go to show that what happened to Angron is not by accident. It was planned. Angron's life had never been in his own. It had only been in the hands of others. And that caused his downfall. Or did it? Whilst it's true that everything that happened to Angron caused him ultimately to die young, did it really cause his own downfall? For whilst from that excerpt, we know that Angron could only feel major amounts of spite and hate, that wasn't always the case. Angron did indeed have a few moments of lucidity, where he was able to think relatively clearly, especially during the early days of the Great Crusade. And it's at these key moments that we get a look into what Angron was, who he really was, when the nails weren't biting, and we get to see the true character of the 12th Primarch, and it's not what most people think it is. A prime example we have comes from Lord of the Red Sands, where after Angron has started the heresy and having to put down some of his warriors within his own legion who did not side with him, he is in a relatively cognizant way. With the butcher's nails being satiated by spilled blood, he's able to think relatively clearly, and we gain a glimpse into the Primarch of the 12th, and we see what Angron was truly about. The officer's remaining eye is narrowed by the preternatural focus necessary to remain alive without screaming when your intestines have been torn from your body. You should not be alive. And yet, here he is, lifting a bolter. Angron smiles at the man's beautiful defiance and slaps the gun aside with the flat of his still roving axe. "No," he says, savagely kind. The warrior and his doomed brethren fought well, and their father is careful to offer no humiliation in these lost moments. His other sons, those loyal to him, are chanting his name, shouting through the ruins. They chant the name his slave handlers gave to him when he was Lord of the Red Sands. Angron, Angron, Angron. He does not know what name the Emperor had intended for him. He had never cared to ask, and now, the chance to do so is denied to him forever. Lord, the dying centurion speaks. Angron crouches by his son, ignoring the nosebleed trickling down his lips as the butcher's nails tick, tick, tick in the back of his brain. I am here, Kuranga. The World Eater draws in a shivery breath, surely one of his last. His remaining eye seeks the Primarch's face. That wound at your throat. Kuroga's words came with blood bubbling at his lips. That was me. Angron touches his own neck. His fingers come away wet, and he smiles for the first time in weeks. You fought well. Primarch's low tones are almost atonic. All of you did. Not well enough. The centurion blares blood-darkened teeth in a rictus grin. Tell me, father, why stand with the arch-traitor? Angron's smile fades, wiped clean by his son's ignorance. None of them have ever understood. They were always so convinced that he should have been honored by being given a legion, when the life he chose was stolen from him the day the Imperium tore him away from his true brothers and sisters. I do not stand with Horus. Angron breathes a confession. I stand against the Emperor. Do you understand, Kuroga? I am free now. Free. Can you not understand that? Why have you all spent these last decades telling me I should feel honored to live as a slave, when I was so close to dying as a free man? And here we get a glimpse into Angron. Angron, in one of his rare moments of lucidity, finally speaks what is in his heart. He did not stand with Horus. He stood against the Emperor. In his heart of hearts, when he is calm and still, he hates what was stolen from him. He hates that he was made a slave again. The only thing that he thinks is hatred. Not caused by the nails, but hatred for the man who stole from him what he considered his birthright. To die as a free man. And that is something that is quite common whenever Angron is in the moment of lucidity. His hatred for the Emperor is something that comes through every single time. Many people believe that if he had simply saved Angron and his brothers and sisters, Angron would have gladly swore fealty to him, and been, as again, this true paragon of a Primarch. But this is a false notion. Time and time again, we see that Angron wanted to die as a free man. Angron's character, he's not a normal man. Granted, no Primarch is normal, but even as we would think it, he values strength, he values honor, he values the need to fight. Again, from the excerpt we see, Angron is happy and he is proud of his sons. Why? Because they died fighting. They died standing up for what they believed in. An honorable and noble death. The one thing that he was denied. Part of the reason as to why didn't the Emperor side with Angron? Why didn't he save the gladiators? Well, maybe because the Emperor knew that even if he did, Angron wouldn't have served him. You take a look at when the Emperor met the other sons, Leman Russ and Vulcan being excellent examples. When he meets Leman Russ, he engages in bouts of drinking, eating, and fighting, things that are core to Leman Russ's nature, and when he succeeds in at least one of them, he gets the Wolf King to swear fealty to him, just like how the Wolf King got the other Lords of Fenris to swear fealty to him, because at the core, that is what loyalty is to Leman Russ. Fraternity. The Emperor earned that fraternity, thus he earned the loyalty of Leman Russ. Vulcan as well. A core tenet of Vulcan's life is self-sacrifice. Someone who is willing to put aside their own pride for the greater good, to do good when nothing is returned, to sacrifice it all. That is something that to Vulcan, that is what it is to be a leader, to be a warrior, to be a soldier. That is a core tenet of his personal belief. The Emperor knew that, and he knew by casting away his pride and saving Vulcan's life, he knew that he would earn Vulcan's trust and his loyalty, because that is what is a core tenet to Vulcan. Angron, however, Angron's core tenet was defiance. All his entire life, he had been told what to do. He had been fought. He was a slave. Angron's entire life consists of combat and defiance. Thus, the ultimate end goal for Angron, the only time he would have ever been happy, was to die fighting. Glory being his tombstone, honor being his grave. That is what Angron wanted. The Emperor knew that. Even if he had saved Angron and his friends, Angron would never have served him. Angron would have still been upset at him, because Angron wanted to die a warrior's death. Angron was not someone who ever enjoyed life. He didn't have a lust for it. But he had a lust for defiance. He had a lust for the end, to simply spite those who came before him. The Emperor could not give him that, because the Emperor still had things he needed Angron to do. He still needed Angron to serve. And servitude was something that Angron despised with every bit of blood in his body. But while in this excerpt we got an example of Angron showing what he truly is about, that being his defiant nobility, one might say. In other excerpts we see that Angron is a little bit more dense, and we get more of his character that is less flattering, taken from Betrayer. "He howled?" asked Lorgar. His eyes were wide, pearly with soft wonder. "The call to retreat. A fighting retreat. It took longer than you can imagine for the world leaders to realize the battle was over. I had whole companies still trying to fight the wolves, as Russ's legion ran for their gunships. They took a whole lot of trophies for their tallies. Many still wear them." For several moments, Lorgar had to watch his brother's flawed face to make sure this wasn't some elaborate jest. "You didn't answer Russ's question. Did you truly learn nothing from that fight?" Angron blinked, the dull-edged surprise coming into his eyes. "What revelation should I have come to? I learned he wasn't allowed to kill me. I learned he postured in the hopes of bringing me back to Terra, collared and submissive to his whims." No. Lorgar was almost breathless in disbelief. No, Angron, you stubborn fool. None of that matters. "There were more dead wolves on that field than world eaters. That matters." That, thought Lorgar, was also arguable, but he let it pass. "Russ had you cold. You said you had him at your mercy, but he crawled free. He crawled. Angron chuckled again, making a meal of the word. And when he rose, he had you surrounded. He could have killed you. He tried and failed. His men, Angron. His legion could have killed you. Whether the Emperor ordered it or not, Russ spared your life. He didn't retreat in shame, you arrogant... He was probably lamenting your thick skull all the way back to Terra, hoping you'd heed a rather consummate lesson in brotherhood and loyalty. Look what happened. Yes, you beat him in a duel. Yes, your men took down more of his than yours. And yet, who won the battle? The World Eaters, Angron said without hesitation. Lorgar just stared at him for several seconds. I appreciate that every living being must be, by their nature of perception, understand and process life in a different way. But even for you, brother, this is achingly obtuse. You're saying the wolves won? Angron looked more amused than confused. How can you not see it? Lorgar steepled his own fingers, trying to rein in his own temper. They won a victory worthy of engraving on their armor for all time. While you were glorying in your strength, Russ's sons were loyal enough to come to him, to surround both of you, to threaten your life while you stood at the vanguard of your own legion. That may be the most comprehensive moment of outmaneuvering in the history of the Legiones Astartes. It's almost poetic in its elegance and emotional resonance. He proves his son's loyalty, while yours leave you to die. He proves the damage the nails are doing to your legion. He proves the tactical strength of taking an objective rather than fighting to purely kill. He spares your life in hope you'll see all this in a lesson it cost him heavily to teach you, and your reaction is to grin and claim yourself the victor? Angron didn't chuckle that time. Lorgar could see it in his brother's tense muscles. Some cognitive switch had clicked somewhere in his consciousness, and Angron's rage was rising again. Only one of us ran away that night. He's weak. God's blood. Lorgar was still managing, barely, to speak calmly. The Primarchs are the bridge between the Emperor and the species he leads. We are all weak, but we are all equal. All of us. We are humanity magnified, its virtues and its flaws. I am not weak. I have never been weak. You are not only weak if you fail to understand Russ's lesson, you are also a fool. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we see something very, very worrying and very rare. A situation and a moment where Lorgar is making so much sense that he is actually making dollars. Angron, without a single shred of a doubt, is so dense and so meat-headed, he cannot see the lesson that Russ was trying to teach him. Russ won that engagement, and he taught Angron a lesson, but Angron did not see it. Now at this time, many of you might say, oh, it's the butcher's nails, but again, this is one of those rare moments where the butcher's nails are not ticking. And it feels very unfair to simply put every single one of Angron's flaws on, oh, the butcher's nails made him that way. Angron is a warrior, he's a soldier, he's a gladiator. He's not one for logistics, he's not one for understanding, he's not one for the arts, he's simple. And this simplicity has sadly translated itself into foolishness. He's so blind to what he only sees ahead of him that he misses out everything on the peripheral. Whilst he's beaten Russ into the dirt, his whole legion had him at gunpoint. Again, it's one hell of an allegory for Angron's life as a whole. He only sees what is in front of him. He fails to see the bigger picture, and even when he realizes what's going on, he just ignores it. He refuses to concede any ground whatsoever. He won the fight, that's all that matters, because that's all that was in his control. Angron suffered greatly because he was never in control. Therefore, the idea that he could never be in control again is something that is so anathema to him and something that hurt him so psychologically that when he's faced with the prospect of it, he just ignores it. The idea that he can't take anything and beat it into submission, that his strength will not save him or his sons, it's something that breaks him, so he ignores it. Time and time and time again, he ignores it. That is just a character flaw of his. Again, many people point to the fact, oh, this is because of the nails and the experience he had with them. But even then, We see time again that many Primarchs have suffered their own flaws and they work to overcome them. A prime example being Perturabo. Perturabo's whole story arc of the heresy is him slowly beginning to understand and change. It's arguably one of the greatest story arcs of any Primarch, and it culminates with him realizing that he does not need to get anyone's attention, he does not need anyone's glory or acclamation, only his own. His own self-worth is enough. A lesson that Angron can't learn. He can't come to terms with the fact that yes, he lost, that it was a lesson to be taught and learn from it, because it wounds his pride, his warrior pride. And Angron is willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for his warrior pride, including his own sons. Angron saw the 12th Legion as a punishment. He did not see himself as a Primarch, a general at the head of a legion of warriors. He saw him as the greatest slave amongst a horde of slaves, the greatest tyrant he had ever known. He hated his sons, he hated the 12th Legion, and he didn't hide that hatred. As I mentioned earlier, he would set incredibly crazy goals. Company of Space Marines to conquer a whole world in under 33 hours? And if they failed, they would be killed via decimation. And this didn't happen once. It happened time after time after time again. When Perturabo first met his sons, he ordered decimation on the Legion. And that was something that was so incredibly terrible that many other Primarchs voiced against that. Yet Angron did it multiple times. Angron did not treat his sons with any degree of respect that they deserved. Especially when you consider that the pre-legion of the World Eaters, that being the Warhounds, was one of the most effective and loyal legions to the Emperor. Angron wanted a group of warriors. True, honest, noble warriors. The Warhounds were just that. Strong, proud, and noble. They were not those to be placed on a pedestal like the 3rd Legion, nor were they Empire builders like the 13th. These were loyal Warhounds. But he refused to see it. Time and time again. All he could focus on was the fact that they weren't his gladiators. And to him, that was their greatest sin. And the nails certainly did not help that at all. Taken from Slaves of Nuceria.
I look out at all of you, my legion, and all I see is weakness. And weakness will not be tolerated. Weakness must be expunged.
Angron stopped, and with a single word, the Primarch issued sentence:
decimation.
Maegel's heart sank. Once more, the lives lost in their failure were to be compounded by Angron's rage. 1 in 10 warriors who had survived, who had fought and bled for each other, for him, would yield their throats as punishment. 1 in 10 would die to appease their lord's broken mind.
Draw lots or make examples, warlords. But 1 in 10 is the price that must be paid.
No. Every eye fell upon Maegel before he had even realized it was he who had spoken. Angron rounded on him, closing the distance between himself and the Centurion in 3 bounding strides. The Primarch towered over his son, blood-laced spittle bubbling from the lipless gash of his mouth.
No.
On Quadrani, it took more than 1 Nucerian day to achieve conquest. And by your command, we killed ourselves. And we did it again at Pajoro and Holu and Tricton and Cestus IV. Our blades are soaked in the blood of brothers, our own kin, for no reason other than to slake your wrath.
Spilled.
Angron lowered his brutish face until it was level with Maegel's.
Because you failed. We did not fail.
Maegel roared. He knew all too well the ways of his father. He knew that he could measure the mere remainder of his life in moments. But he no longer cared about what would happen to him. He would have his say in front of all his brothers before Angron tore him apart. We went back every time after killing our own kin in shame. And we conquered those worlds. We won those wars. The flag of the Imperium was raised over their cities. and their peoples are now subjects because of our toil, because of our blood. Mago looked his father in the eye, and here we stand now, given the order that those of our brothers who have fallen in honor today must be joined by those who will fall in disgrace? No, no more. For a few seconds, Angron said nothing. Mago felt the hot breath of the Primarch on his face, reeking of blood. Suddenly, Angron reared from his hunch to full height. His face turned upwards and he laughed. Angron's laugh was a booming, wet sound. It rang across the Triumph Hall like thunder. Mago had never heard it before. Perhaps none of the Legion had, with the possible exception of Khan. It did nothing to diminish the terror that exuded from his presence.
"I like you, Captain,"
said Angron, coughing away at the blood trickling from his nose and baring the iron pegs that replaced his teeth in a feral grin.
"You at least have the spine to speak your thoughts. That is why I will still let you pick. Father, choose now," said Angron, the smile gone as quickly as it had come, "or I will choose for you."
This legion is your legion. Its warriors carry your blood in their veins. I will not see their lives squandered any further. Enough have died today already. I am asking you, my Primarch, my father, do not do this. Any trace of the amusement Angron had expressed moments before had vanished.
"So many times, again and again,"
he snorted, his eyes twitching as they went in and out of focus.
"You come over and over. You tell me we are your sons. You are our lord. Our lives are yours to command. Is that not what you told me in the cave, Khan? To get me to come back here? Are you liars as well as cowards? Am I your master or are I not? If I am the master of your fates, as you have often said, then the fate I proclaim now is decimation."
Mago clenched his teeth until his jaw creaked. Madness.
"Careful, Captain,"
said Khan from the Primarch's side, lending his voice a cold edge with the warning.
"You will choose,"
Angron repeated, his temper rising.
"Or I will choose for you. Who will be first?"
"I will." Salikar walked through the ranks of the 18th, brothers pairing before him, until he stood at Mago's side. "Do not take from the front rankers, Lord. Their valor has been proven in battle." He knelt before the Centurion, pulling his head back to expose his throat. Mago looked down at Salikar, the future of the World Eaters, a wellspring of potential to be snuffed out and cast aside for nothing.
"Theirs was not the only valor that was proven, brother."
"For the Legion," Salikar whispered, eyes open and face calm in acceptance. Mago hesitated. He closed his eyes, drew in a breath, and opened them again.
"For the Legion,"
he whispered back as he took up his knife.
"No."
Mago turned, his blade still poised at Salikar's throat. Angron's lipless maw twisted in an ugly grin.
"Put your blade away. Your spirit does you credit, but you talk too much. You, Captain, will do it by hand."
The knife shook in Mago's hand. This was beyond punishment, beyond humiliation. This was hatred. What kind of father could hate his children so? What father could do this?
"I won't,"
said Mago. The clanging of his knife hitting the deck reverberated across the Triumph Hall.
"No more, father."
Sadly, in the end, the defiance of Centurion Mago would be all for naught. His blood would be spilled by the Primarch's hands, and decimation would continue. Here again, some will argue that it is the nails that have made Angron this way. But again, to simply say that every single negative thing Angron had ever done was purely because of the nails, I do not believe that that is fair, nor just. Especially when you consider here and now. To order decimation is one thing, But Mago put it perfectly. This was not punishment. This was hatred. Angron hated his legion. He always hated his legion, and he treated them with disdain. Time and time again, Angron chose to snub his legion, comparing them to the gladiators of old. He could not let go of that time. So narrow-minded was he that all he could focus on was what he had lost. He could not see what he had achieved, and whom he had gotten. The fact that after everything Angron had done to him, that there were still World Eaters who were willing to be loyal to him, proved the loyalty of the Warhounds, and why Angron truly did not deserve them. So then, it's finished. Angron was just a monster. Despite everything that happened to him, he was evil. He chose to be evil, he chose to be malicious, he chose hatred, he chose suffering. He ignored everything. He was simply a brutish madman. Whether or not he had the nails, whether or not he had anything, he would simply be a monster of rage, a pitiful excuse of a man. No. No, he would not. Again, the answer is far more complex than we would ever imagine. For whilst there are many times where Angron shows hatred, wrath, rage, there are a few moments again of rare lucidity where Angron lays bare his more vulnerable side. Angron had wept once, and only once, in all the years of his life. He remembered it well, but it was his first memory outside the stifling confinedness of his gestation tube. He pulled himself from the sundered warmth of his birth pod and into the freezing mountain air. All he could see was red, and all he could taste was his own blood. The wounds across his body froze as soon as he crawled free. Ice burned and cauterized. After a fashion, he was a boy. Just a boy. And he was bleeding all over. They'd come for him. Spindly shadows, quick as the wind, howling and laughing and cursing in a language he couldn't follow. He'd kill them. Of course he'd killed them, the moment he sensed them drawing near. He smelled the metal of their weapons and struck at them, without knowing any more than the metal scent meant danger and death. He'd beaten several to them with death with a rock the size of his fist. Others tried to run, but the bleeding boy had chased them over the tundra, bringing them down and tearing at their throats with his fingers and teeth. But he'd wept that day, not because of his attackers, whoever they were, not because of the pain of his wounds, though he was but a boy, and none would judge him harshly for crying a boy's tears at the wounds he'd suffered. No, he'd wept upon his first emergence from the pod, because of the wind against his skin. Even as the gale bit at his injuries with cold teeth, the feeling of freedom brought tears to his eyes. In all the decades since, he'd never shed a tear, not until now. 2 saltwater droplets freezing to his mangled face the moment they trailed down. All dead, my brothers, my sisters, he said softly. Logar approached, careful where he walked, doing all he could to not disturb the sacred ground. What did you name your enemies? High Riders. We called them High Riders for how they stood above us, watching us die in the arena's dirt. The High Riders took their dead with them. There aren't enough bones to be the remains of both armies. My brothers and sisters, Angron said again. I swore I'd stand with them. We would die together. Life had never seen such fighters, Logar. Kelster riding her shriek sphere. Jaracha with his strangling change. Asti, little Asti, stealing knives to throw and cut and stab. His grin warmed the cold nights. Lobodon, who lost his arm to gangrene, shouting for the High Riders to follow if they dared. He had my back, as I had his. We'd slipped on gore together, grinding the fallen beneath our boots. Angron shook his head as he continued. Words do not do them justice. We came from the red sands, growing in the filth, eating the shit the High Riders fed us. But we broke free. Thousands, Lorgar. Thousands of us. We were free. And we lived and laughed, and we made the bastards pay. The nails hurt. Ah, how they hurt even then. But we made the High Riders and their paper-skin kin god pay. Lorgar listened in silence as Angron lowered his head. I should have died here. I did die here. The Primarch of the Wood Eaters is nothing but a shade. An echo. This is where I belong. The greatest battle of my life. And it was stolen from me. Lorgar spoke, not without a slight smile. There will be a greater battle, brother. Terror. And I promise you no one will deny it to you. Terror. Terror! Angron laughed, the sound rotten with bitterness. I piss on terror. I care nothing for terror or Horus. Or him. Him. The Emperor. Then why do I hear such hatred in your voice? Angron pulled the chain blades from their scabbards on his back, clenching the handle triggers and setting them roaring. He took them from me. He dragged me into the sky. The Emperor. The gods' damned Emperor. You'll have your vengeance, Angron. We will stand upon Terra's soil again before long. You have my word. My brothers. Angron continued, murmuring low, not hearing his brother's oath. My sisters. Slaves all. Fighting pit slaves. Our lives were mud to the High Riders that held chains around our throats. But our masters paid. Oh, how they paid. This world burned when we broke free. It burned, I promise you that. The other Primarch nodded in slow understanding. I believe you. Angron still wasn't hearing anything but the ghosts in his mind. The war dragged on. Season after season. City after city. The rivers ran red with High Rider blood. We fought. We fought everywhere. I swear it. The High Riders charged our shield wall at Falkar. They charged us. Their lordlings demanded it of them. And they rose to the bait. I still hear the thunder of both lines meeting. Do you hear it? He turned eyes wild on Lorgar. Do you hear the thunder? Lorgar smiled, his rune-painted face ruthlessly kind. I hear it, brother. But we fled when the seasons turned. We had to run into the mountains, to the ridges, to survive the winter. Too many High Rider armies were coming after us, with their lasers and grenades and machine guns, rattling all day and night. I swore I'd die with my brothers and sisters in the mountains. We were free. It was our death. The death we earned. The death we wanted. We laughed and called them closer. High Rider bastards. Angron turned, living in the moment a second time, vaulting onto a boulder and throwing his arms wide. He shouted. Nay, he screamed, his laughing challenge to the sky. Come and die, dogs of the Nesha. I am Angron of the pits, born in blood, raised in darkness. I will die free. Come and watch me fight one last time. Is that not what you want? Is that not what you've always wanted? Come closer, you dog-blooded cowards! Khan watched his Primarch standing against the rising wind, seeing history repeated itself in a tone of maddened memory. Angron raised his chainswords, miming the first cuts and carves of the last fight. The teeth roared with every sweep. The gathering legionaries were transfixed, staring
in silence. And then, the Emperor stole me, trapped me, banished me to the Conqueror's dark belly, teleported me up in orbit, though at the time I knew nothing of technology. I was alone in the dark, and my brothers and sisters died. They died here. They died without me. I swore. We all swore. We swore to stand and fight and die. Together.
Angron rocked back and forth.
Together.
The words of a man who had everything stolen from him. The words of a man who only had one thing that meant anything to him. The words of a man that had that thing stolen from him. Broken, beaten, and betrayed. One who was denied everything he had ever wanted. To die with those he loved. Instead, he was forced to go on without them, fighting as a slave evermore. All Angron ever wanted was that moment where finally he could be an equal and spite those who had sought to wrong him and his family. But the Emperor stole that from him. These are not the words of someone who only knew hate. These are the words of someone who only knew pain. Someone who only felt hardship. Someone who had never gotten the one thing he had so desperately wanted. Angron was a pained soul. A soul robbed of everything. How sad it must be for a man to live in only pain and agony, horror and torment, never knowing anything else but suffering. No wonder he became what he became. But surprising everyone, there were moments of lucidity that Angron had that weren't during a fight. And whether or not these were moments of lucidity or whether or not he was able to ignore the nails, despite everything that happened, Angron was able to be a father to his sons, despite how he hated them, even if only for a little bit. It wasn't just the loyalty of the Warhounds that kept them honest to Angron. It was something more than that. Angron did love them in some way, or he loved some aspects of them. These moments were rare, but they weren't absent. Taken again from Betrayer. Angron cared nothing for the Conqueror's command, trusting it to the officers trained for the task. He cared similarly little for his warriors' training, trusting the Centurions to handle the mundane aspects of Legion life. Several times he was seen in the company of Velkeradir, entering or exiting the Archmagos' forge chambers. Other times he walked the wide halls of the Conqueror's War Museum, pausing for long conversations with archivists, when his skull aches allowed him the patience to do so. When he spent any time among his men, it was never with any preferred chapter or company, always with his attention divided between them. The Conqueror housed precious few of his legion, while the rest were engaged in the pacification of Oshamar, and those present saw more of their Primarch in that 1 month than they had in the several years before. He drank with them, watched the gladiatorial duels, laughing as they laughed and sharing the warmth of brotherhood in a way very few Primarchs enjoyed with their men. So Angron did love his sons. Or did he? Right now I imagine a few of you are confused. What was Angron? He hated his sons, we have examples of that, but he also loved them and shared brotherhood with them at the same time. He was a man of rage, pure rage, but also a man who was hurt, deeply so. Much of his own life his decisions were made for him, yet the decisions he did make for himself were questionable. Where does that leave Angron? And the answer is surprisingly simple. Angron is just a human. In Warhammer 40k, a lot of the times many people like to put labels on various characters or factions. Oftentimes people often say there are no good guys in Warhammer 40k, but every time you say that they'll get plenty of people giving you stories and examples of people being good. If you say one thing about a particular faction, there'll be someone else saying something completely different. And these will cause debates in the community. Some of them prosperous, some of them a little less so. But then why is that the case? And that's because Warhammer 40k is unique in that every single faction is complex. There are no simple factions in Warhammer 40k. Even the Tyranids and the Orcs have incredible history and lore to them that make them interesting and complex characters. So too are the Primarchs. Angron is just that. He is a complex man. Angron was never going to be a combination of Vulcan and Sanguinius. He was never going to be this perfect paladin. But in the same vein, he wasn't always going to be this hateful monster. He was going to be like his legion, a warhound. Loyal, brutish, violent, but also honorable and noble. The Angron we got in Warhammer 40k is indeed because of other people's actions, but is in my opinion an insult to the character to simply say that, oh, every bad thing that Angron did was because of the nails. No. Angron had choices. One of those choices was that he refused to forget what happened to his brothers and sisters. Now yes, of course that's not something one can just forget, but plenty of people have suffered deep trauma in their lives, and they've managed to move on from it, or at least to accept it. He was given a legion of brothers, and we see that when he allowed himself, he was able to form a brotherhood with them, like those gladiators of old. But that was only after the heresy, only after he had allowed his hatred to be vented, when he let go of it, when he could sate himself on the blood of the Emperor's Imperium. And ladies and gentlemen, that then brings me to Angron's greatest flaw. Angron was too hateful to learn, yet also too spiteful to prosper. He could not forget all the injustice done to him. All he could do was think and dwell upon the poison that was all that happened to him. In truth, he should have died that day on Nuceria, but he lived. And instead of accepting that he lived, and trying to make a life worth living to honor his fallen brothers and sisters, he chose to act like a dead man, a mindless butcher, refusing to learn, refusing to prosper, refusing to do anything that wasn't part of that hatred. Again, yes, the nails had a massive impact on this, and they certainly did not help. But again, to simply say that the nails are the only reason why Angron is like this is an injustice to his character. When coming to the Primarchs, there's a question of nature and nurture. That being what makes us who we are, that we are all born a certain way, or that we are raised that way. It is my personal belief that nurture is the chief in that regard. For, depending on how you raise someone, you can either curb their bad tendencies, or, in Angron's case, exacerbate them. Angron was always going to be a tough bastard, someone who valued strength above all else. But it could have been tempered with understanding, to have his strength used for good. Instead, he grew up in a place where strength was used for hate. Hate, spite were his meat and drink. And that is all he ended up doing. There were moments of lucidity that Angron had. He chose to give up. Angron, during his moments of lucidity, just leaves his legion. He abandons everything to live out his life with nothing. No peace, no happiness, just to exist. He gave up. It took Khan coming back to convince him to rejoin. He was a broken man who gave up. And in that regard, he was weak. Someone who hated and abhorred weakness so much, he took the coward's way out. He gave up living. He gave up trying. He wanted to die. So he lived like a dead man, ignoring the life that was given to him. Now yes, the life that was given to him was bad, it was poor. But I feel like a good example would be Sanguinius. Sanguinius too had a legion at his disposal, a legion of revenant dead. Yet, he chose to change them. He chose to fight. He chose to fight the curse of his blood. He chose to do something, to stand. Whereas Angron did not. And that's because Angron didn't have anyone. The people he did have were taken from him, and when they were, anyone who could have been something to him, he ignored. In conclusion, Angron would not have been a good noble paladin that many people think he would have. He also wouldn't have become a bloodthirsting ravenous butcher like he did become in our own timeline. Angron, however, would have been human. A human man who had a choice. To fight, to overcome, and to never say die. Or to give up. To embrace nothingness. To embrace weakness. The coward's way out. Angron could have been something much more, but at the end of the day, Angron is human. He's a human story. The story of his legion is human. The story of him is human. Someone hurt, someone robbed, someone who laments about the past that they forego their future, and who suffers but his sons. Children who cannot understand the concept of why their father hurts so much, and how he will never explain it to them. Angron is indeed a tragedy, but he is a human tragedy. Oftentimes, we like to put beautiful twists on tragedies about how they are the aspects of gods and demons. But the greatest tragedy of all is not of the divine comedy. Rather, it is of the mortal reality. And I believe that Angron is the perfect example of that. A man broken. A man who became too hateful to learn, yet too spiteful to prosper. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. You guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And how do you guys think Angron would have acted? Love to hear your thoughts down below. But I want to thank y'all for watching so very much, but even a special thank you to my members. Shout out to Mr. Ken Peter who joined at our private tier. Thank you my brother and welcome to the core. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3, Mr. Draw of the Void, and Mr. Curtis Studies. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sean IRL7, and Mr. Bullwin. Shout out to my Corporal tier members, Mr. Tremaine the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Miss Shauna Smithers, Mr. Gentle Salamander, and the Wench of Warhammer. And finally, certainly but not least, shout out to my awesome private tier members, Mr. Thomas Wells Lawns, Mr. Iva_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Aida, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortus Udum, Mr. CM Dine, Mr. Eric Massaro, and Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken Sakura _333. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate y'all. So now today with memberships, I get a bunch of awesome benefits behind the scenes stuff, early access videos, and most importantly, get to help out you, your boy. But remember, this will always be free. So whether give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Before I go, super sorry that things have been rather sporadic lately. It's been kind of rough. IRL stuff is happening. Lots of nonsense. I'm okay. I'm alright. Don't worry. But trying to get to the videos is being a bit of the difficult. So I want to thank you all so much for being understanding. To my members especially, thank you oh so very much. I will try and get back to doing everything that's promised when life gets a little bit on the easier side, but it's a lot. So yeah, thank you and appreciate y'all. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Brother 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. Yeah, I'm sure to stay loyal out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I know somebody's just gonna come and be like, oh yeah, his butchers and nails are the reason. Like, that just makes it boring. Like, I do not come for Warhammer 40k to be boring. I come for it for elf puss.